Hello folks, this is Leah Wanasaki from Master Lab Systems. Today we'll be building a complete full stack CRUD application for using Java SpringBoot and ReactJS for frontend. So of course CRUD stands for create, root, update and delete functionality in normal APIs. Okay? So let's look at the agenda for today's topic. Okay, so the first we have is to explore the overview of the project, look at the backend setup using SpringBoot, Java SpringBoot and REST API, configure and develop the front-end setup as well using ReactJS and Axios for HTTP requests, and look at integrating backend and front-end together using the H2 database, which is the in-memory database for the backend, and testing and running the full application, and also doing the wrap-ups and next steps. Okay, so let's look at the introduction for the project. So we'll develop a RESTful API with SpringBoot for handling data operations, build a ReactJS project for front-end for interacting with the API, connect the backend to an H2 in-memory database for quick testing and lightweight data storage. Lastly, configure the CORS, which is the cross-origin request servers, to enable smooth integration between the front end and the backend. Okay. So let's look at the backend setup using Java SpringBoot. So we'll create a new SpringBoot project and also add the necessary dependencies, which is Spring Web, Spring Data GPA, H2, and Lombok for boilerplate reducing. Okay. And we'll create the models, repository service, control layers such as examples, book Java, and controller to Java, which is what we'll be exploring or looking at. Okay. Looking at the H2 database configuration, so we'll explore the in-memory setup using our application.yaml file or in our application.properties file, which is our normal configuration file in Java SpringBoot application projects, and access the H2 console, which is something that you might want to explore if you want to view your DB or your tables and structure in the H2 console. Okay. Now looking at the front-end setup, so we'll create a React project using Node.js and install the necessary dependencies as well, which is the Axios and Bootstrap, and create the components, and lastly API calls to our SpringBoot endpoints. Okay. Now let's look at connecting React and SpringBoot. So we'll configure the calls in the backend, ensures, which is the ensures, to also configure the ensures methods, which is the REST methods such as the get and the post examples, and demonstrate the live data fetching, which is when we are fetching the data live from the backend. Okay. And running the application, which is now running the SpringBoot. Of course, we can run using the npm SpringBoot to run, and running the front end using the npm start and doing the full demo flow. Okay, folks. So I guess for now we can start deep diving to actual backend setup. Okay, so of course for setting up new SpringBoot project, I'd like to use the SpringBoot initializer, which is, if you can come here, let's do Spring initializer, or do initializer. Yes, if I come to my history, so we come here to initiate a new SpringBoot project. Okay, let's give it a name. Can maybe say com dot depending on whatever you might give it, of it master lab artifact. Okay, so demo, it's fine, we can put it to demo, maybe just to give it a name. Of course, go to catalog management, since this is the backend part, so we can give it as catalog management. So we can copy this here, put it here. So now we have a full package name. Okay, so for SpringBoot version, it's fine to keep it as 3.5.7, and the language, it's Java, and the build tool, it's Maven. Those are fine. So now let's look at packaging. Let's put it to jar, which is fine. Configuration, you can say now you can it's either select properties or YAML, which I like to use to, in this case, let's just use YAML, which makes it easy, simpler and easier to read. So Java version, let's use 17 for now. Okay, so here comes the dependency side. So the dependencies that we need web. Since we're building a web application, so we need web, and we need the h2 to store our data, so we need the h2 in mem database. Okay, and we need, again, now we can use Lombok as well for reducing boilerplate code, which makes it easier for us to, instead of like writing the normal data and setters, we can simply annotate the project. But of course we'll look at that. So lastly, we can add the dev tools. Yes. Okay, so once you have all of these folks, you will simply just generate and export it to your IDE. So of course I'll show you how we can do that. So now that we have done the configuration of our project, so we are ready to export it or to generate it. So as you can see, it has been generated. So now I will export it, or I will open it using my IDE. Currently I'm using IntelliJ. So of course I already have done the process. So now I'm just going to start up to an exported project. Okay, so here is now an exported one for the backend side. So now this is what you should be seeing. Yes, you may not be seeing this one, but the rest, it should be the same even in your end, except also for this one, which is the token file as well. You're also not going to be seeing it, but the rest should be it. And if you go to your source directory, you shouldn't be seeing anything, which is exactly it in my case. So we go to Java, it should be empty. Resources also as well. So you should all be seeing this one depending on your config, but of course we'll be looking at that as well. Okay, so now that we have this as the setup, so we can begin to add our code. Then we can start to test the backend side before moving in on to the front-end side. Okay, so now what we need here, we need our, okay, so let's say you recently exported it. So maybe the first step that we will want to confirm is, of course, if you go to your POM file, which is also important, to view dependencies, which is of course the dependencies that we added from our IDE or from our Spring initializer. So once you have all of this in place, then it should mean it's fine. So again, that's all that you can confirm right now. So again, one of the things that before even adding the code side, let's now, as I said, I want us to use the application.yaml file. So now we'll also create that one in. So if I do, let's do now application .yaml. So let's have that in. Okay, so now we can just add our PC config. So I have some dummy templates here that I would love to use, so I'm just going to copy from those, but of course we'll go through them together. So here is what this means. So automatically Spring will give you this bit when you have imported your project, but the rest of the data source, of course, you're not going to get that one. So which is what we need. So again, we just need to specify the data source. As I said, we are using the in-memory DB, so we can easily interact with our database and be able to manage the DB operation. So we'll be using the h2, which is the in-memory database. So of course, once you have that, you will need to declare data source, the URL for that. You will pass your JDBC, h2 mem, and your project name. Driver class, of course, going to be org h2 as the driver, and the username, of course, the password, you can leave it empty. So since this project uses GPA to interact with DB or to run some DB operations, we need to also specify that or to declare that as well. So of course, now it's the h2 console enabled. So of course, if you want to interact with your DB or want to see your tables from the h2 console, you can also do that here. But of course, that is not really needed for this case. But that's our basic configuration that we need for the application side. So now we can start to add the code. So of course, I'll close this one so we can have a full project with a simple basic structure for now. Okay, so now let's begin adding our packages. So the first package that we have will have the config. I like to say config. Let's add the config. Let's look at the second one that we need. We need the entity. Once we have the entity, we need the controller. Once we have the controller, we need the repository. Okay, and lastly, we need the service. So let's add all our packages, service. Yes, okay, so now the config, and with the controller, and with the entity, and we have the repository, we have the service. Okay, so now that our project has got all the basic structure that we needed, all the basic packages that we need, so we can begin to edit the code. Okay, so I'll start with the first class that we need, which is the book. So we need the book to Java, so let's create that in. That's fine. So from here let's add another one, which is the book type. Okay, we need the book type. So book type. Okay, so here instead of adding as a class, let's call it a num, because of this one should only accept what it needs to only accept the 3 book types, so which is the ebook currently, which is the ebook, and the soft copy, and lastly the hardcover. Okay, okay, so we'll look at those, which is still fine. Okay, we'll look at those. Okay, that's fine. So might have a mistake here, just remove this. Right, so now we have a clean project. Okay, so we are done with the book type. Okay, that's our book type. Okay, so now let's begin to add another functionalities. Okay, so we have the entity class, which is fine. That's the entity. So now let's just finalize this class. Okay, I have prepared some snippets so I don't consume much time. So I'm just gonna copy most of this and then of course explain them. So if I copy from this now and then we'll look at it and clean it up together. So I have prepared of course a book class that I want us to look at. So if we copy this book class and come to edit as our book, it's our book class. So we need to have something like this. We're just going to remove all of this so we can have a clean structure, a clean structured code. Okay, so of course all of this it's automated, so which is something that we will also look at on how we can generate our own getters and setters. Okay, so let's say now folks we had something similar to this one. So what I'll just do now, so instead of us, let's say we didn't have all of this bit, so now we can just take it off. So basically this is the normal project class, which is for plain old Java objects. If you're creating objects using the normal core Java, so we'll have something similar to this one. So which is what you are seeing here. So let's take this off. So we will have a structure that is like this. So of course this is automatically generated if you are using IntelliJ. So for example, if I were to show you how you generate the getters and setters again. So let's say you already have it declared, which is your argumented constructor. Well, first of all, we need to what? We need to call our book. We need to call our book type so we can be able to initialize it. Okay. So this book type, of course, is being called where? By our book object or by our book class. So let's say now we needed to create the getters and setters. So another simplest way is if you are using IntelliJ, you can simply go to generate. So it can generate your constructor, getters only if you want getters, setters only if you want setters, and equals or to string. So in this case, we need what? Getters and setters. So I'm just gonna all my variables. So this is another way that you can generate. As you can see, there is our getters and setters. So they have been generated successfully, folks. So again, if you have declared your variables, it will automatically be able to pick those up and generate them accordingly based on what you want. So of course, same thing that you can just simply do. Okay, so folks, now we are done with the book class. We can move on now to our what? To a repository and the other functionalities. Okay, so we have that in. Okay. Okay, either way, we'll delete this. I'm just going to comment out. So now that's fine. That's fine. I can leave it. Okay, so now that we are done with those, so let's move on now to repository. Okay, again, as I said, I all got some snippets prepared, so I'm just gonna simply copy those and explain them accordingly. So if I just copy this, okay, so again we come in here to create our repository. Okay, do this, repository. Okay, you have that in, so let's just paste this here. Okay, instead of calling it a repository, let's rather call it something meaningful, which is book repository, instead of just calling it repository. So again, you go to the filter and then you can do rename. So let's call it book repository. That makes more sense, calling it that way. Okay, so now let's paste our snippet. So of course, as I said, you can simply fix this. I'm just gonna remove this bit here. Okay, and then fix the imports. So it should give us something like this. Repository, take this off. So we have a structure now that is like this, which says, okay, so the normal repositories are an interface because they are expanding from a repository that is already a built-in repository. So that's why they are normally interfaces. So for example, we are creating a book repository interface which expands the JPA repository, so you can be able to get the functionality from the JPA repository. So the function that we are looking for in this case is normally the CRUD functionality that we are looking for. So that's why we are extending, or why we are creating this class as an interface instead of the normal Java class. And importantly, we need to annotate it as a repository. So SpringBoot can automatically be able to bootstrap and know this is a repository class. Okay, so of course we need to provide the class of our book, which is the book. We need to specify the book so it knows that it needs to bootstrap based on our book model. Okay, and the long, which is the ID. Normally this is the ID, so we are specifying the long. Okay, so once you have that in, so that should be also be fine. So from creating a book repo, we have that in and the book repository. So now we can move to the service class. Okay, so here let's call it book service. Okay, and copy also the snippet for it. Okay, so let's go add that in. Okay, I'm just gonna quickly remove and fix this and clean it up. Okay, so now that we have a full clean structure, okay, so this is now our book service. So it means the book service contains all our logic that goes to all our logic or our operations, meaning the business logic. This is where now we are doing the implementation of the CRUD functionality. So of course, I'll go through the code again. So the functionality that we require for now, it's the list and the find all, well, which is the list or find all function, which returns all our book in our DB, and then we have the save functionality that saves or that allows us to save our books to our DB. Same goes to update and the delete. So meaning it does the delete operation to our DB. So as I said, of course, so here, so now what we have here, we have a structure that is like a, so we are creating what an instance of a book repository, which we are calling it a repository. So this, they said, this repository will grant us the ability to be able to use the functionalities that is available from our JP repository. So that functionality would mean if we need to save or remove something, delete, or even file something. So which is what we are seeing basically from this case. So we have the first functionalities. Okay, so here we are creating what we're doing dependency injection. So however, at a constructor level, so instead of doing a field injection, we're doing constructor injection. So what's the benefit of this? So it helps us, instead of like exposing or directly injecting the dependency to the field. For example, we had an ability, if we wanted to inject this annotation, which is auto wire, directly from here. But of course, Spring, we are violating Spring by doing this. So it's still the same code, but it's not recommended to inject or to do a direct field injection. So hence we normally would just auto wire or annotate it from what? From the constructor side. Okay, so once we have that in, we create our first functionalities, which is now the find all or the list that lists all our available books, or that returns all our available books from our catalog. So which is the list book find all, which is the function name, and then we return what? Repository dot find all, which is that in from the same site. Now we go to the second function, which is now the book. So basically here we're doing what? A public book, meaning the book entity, and then we are creating a save functionalities that takes a what? That takes an instance of a book and assign that instance of a book to the book. So meaning it saves, it gives us the advantage to save our book instance that we're getting from the user input, and we are saving it to, and we are mapping it to the book entity. Okay. So same goes with the update. So we are updating based on the ID provided, and we are saving that from the book that we are updating. So same goes lastly, which is the last function, which is the delete. So what it means, now we are getting back based on the ID, and then we are deleting from that ID. So we are deleting a book based on the ID that is provided to us. Okay. So we are also done with this one. So now we can go to the controller side. So now if we create another class called the book controller, okay, let's have that in. So let's go get our snippet as well for the controller. Okay. Okay, let's go paste that in, and then we can look at the code. Okay, so of course, if you haven't worked with Swagger, I would suggest, because of this tutorial or this demo, it contains some Swagger stuff. So, but of course, I'll explain that as well. So let's first fix the minor errors that we are having here and look at the code. Okay, so this is the code that we're having. So it means I'm just gonna start from the basic, which is, so the first tag, since we are building a REST controller, so we need to annotate it with the REST. So at the controller level, this is a REST controller, so we need to annotate it with the REST. So Spring can treat this as a REST controller. Okay, so at the tag annotation, this is for Swagger. So it means we are documenting our APIs. So as you can see at tag name, so but however it's not really necessary, but for building an API or documenting our API, it's important, especially if you are using Swagger schema. So I would suggest, if you haven't worked with Swagger, you look at my first my tutorial regarding Swagger schema or documenting API using Swagger. I have a tutorial regarding that gave you the basic explanation on how you can implement it and adapt it to your own project. So I normally do the same thing for any of my APIs that I like to build. So of course, this is what it means. So I give it a tag name, book API, and then we give you a description, CRUD operations for managing books. Okay, and then we give it, which is now the request mapping. So it means the request will come from API, books, depending on the function that you're trying to call. So as I've explained to this, again, this is a constructor injection, not a dependency or not a fault injection. So meaning we are creating a book instance, and with the name of a book service, with the name of, we are creating a service, a book instance, a book service instance with the name of a service, and then we are assigning that in. Okay, so which is now, this is this book service that will give us ability to be able to accept all the incoming request bodies and be able to map them based on the functionality that the user require. Okay, so for example here, the first function that we have, which is the get all. So it, as I said as I explained it on the book service side, it's still doing the same thing. However, that side we're calling repository, but now we are calling the service, as it is the service now that is able that we are communicating with. Okay, so let me just narrow this again. So of course we are now annotating with the, as I said, documenting using auto operation for Swagger. So we are giving it a summary and a description. And now let's look at the function itself, which is the get books. So which gets all our available books from our DB and then returns them all. And then now looking at our second functionalities, again we are doing the same thing, operating by means documenting it. We're giving it a summary of add a new book, because this is for adding a new book, and give it in a description. Okay, looking at the function on its own, this is a post method, because of what it gets the request and forwards the request to the DB. So it's not like it's just getting something, it's getting something and forwarding that request so to be processed to someone, which means in this case using the DB. So hence we are giving it a post mapping. Okay, so as I said, it takes what? It takes what? A request body of a book instance and saves that book instance to the book, to the overall book. Okay, same goes with this one, which is the update operation. So again, we are documenting it first, and we are running the normal operation. So now this is a put, because now we are updating something that already exists. So we need to put to it. Instead of getting to it or posting to it, we need to be putting, because it already exists. It's a resource that already exists that we are trying to update. So again, this resource, this function, it means we are updating a book. So we are updating a book by what? So we are getting what? A book instance and an ID of that book instance, and we are now saving that ID to that book instance, or we are updating that book instance using that ID, and then we are saving that. Okay, so same goes with the last function, which is the delete operation. So this one again, it just deletes the book based on the past book ID. So for example, it gets what? A path variable of a long ID and then delete that book based on that ID that was provided. Okay, so folks, I think the backend side should be ready now for us to start testing with before moving on to the front end layer. Okay, for the config side, we'll look at it once we are doing the backend. For now, let's not worry about the config because of it will be important to see it when we are facing the problem for it. So for now, let's not focus on the config layer, but we'll look at it as well because it will be required anyway. So now that we have all of that, folks, we can begin to run our project, maybe do a quick test run before moving to the backend side. So if now I come into our catalog, which is to our main class, and I try to run this project, so let's run it. Okay, it's doing a build. Okay, let's give it some minutes while it's building. Okay, it's building. Okay, it's compiling. Okay, now seems to be starting up. Okay. Okay, as you can see, folks, Tomcat has started on port 88, so it means the project is successfully started. So we can begin to test our API. Okay, so as you can see, the application is started successfully. So now let's test by adding one API, or by adding one book to using our book API. Okay, so if I go to my Postman, and then I already have prepared some basic API or some basic request, basic HTTP request that I would love to test with. For example, if we look at this one, so now our project takes a parameter of a name, ISBN number, published date, and the price, and the book type, which could be either a ebook, a soft cover, or a hardcover. So now let's create it using an ebook. So if we send this request now, okay, as you can see, folks, we're getting back a 200 status code. It means our book entity has been saved successfully. So now if again maybe we try to add another one, we should give us a book ID of 2. So maybe Java clean code with a basic ISBN, find date, I'll give it so there. So maybe let's give it 1200. Okay, fine. Book type, it's fine. Give it as an ebook. So let's send this request as well. Okay, as you can see, folks, this second book as well has already been saved successfully. So now that we have this now, I believe now we can start moving on to the front end side, or maybe even do some few test runs as well. So of course, if we come to our browser, we should be able to interact using Swagger schema. So if I do localhost 8080, okay, this is Swagger Okay, yes, this is our Swagger schema. So as I've said, this is now how Swagger schema or how Swagger schema really help us in documenting our API. So all of that documentation that I was referring to on this side, this is now how nice it can give us. So it means all of these operations that I'm annotating with here, this is the overall outcome when we are running your project. This is what you should be receiving or what you should be seeing on your browser if you are using the Swagger endpoint. So of course, I said if you worked with Swagger in documenting APIs, you can look at my previous tutorial regarding integrating Swagger to your project. So of course, now if we go to get all, this basically gives us an easy way to interact with our APIs without any hassles, rather than if you don't have, for example, Postman, you would struggle in interacting with your API. So using Swagger schema or Swagger UI gives you an ability to easily interact with your backend API. Okay, so now if for instance we do a try it out, so let's execute it. This is a get endpoint, so we just need to return back our data. Okay, as you can see folks, these are our 2 books that we have successfully saved from our DB. So we are getting them back successfully. Okay, so again, if now we need to test by let's say maybe we needed to delete one of the new books that we updated, so now we just need to pass an ID. So maybe let's delete book number 2, which is the one that is ID 2. So if we execute this, it should delete that book. So again, as you can see, our status code is 200, so it means our book has been successfully deleted. But we can verify that if we want to by going back again to our get all books endpoint and try to return all our books again and see if we will find book ID number 2. So let's execute it. As you can see folks, we're only getting 1 book back. It means the API is responding successfully and is able to process our request. As you can see, now we're getting 1 book. Okay, so we are ready now to begin going to the front end side. Okay, so now with backend, it means the backend is fully functioning, it is ready. So now what I will do now, I will leave it as is for now while it is still running, because now that we are using the H2 DP in memory, it means if I would stop or I would kill this process while it's still running, it will lose all the data we have saved, which is not a problem, which is normal when you are using the in-memory DB, because it works with in-memory. So if immediately your systems or your service restarts, it has lost all your data. So that's the disadvantage of using the H2. Okay, so anyway, let's go to our terminal now and create the front-end project. Okay, so of course, to create a new project, I will show you a command that you can simply do, and then you can just import your project to your own environment or to your own text editor. So in my case, this time I will be using Visual Studio Code or VS Code. So again, be sure that you are on a correct path and where you can be able to export or to import a project. So the path that I will be at this time will be at catalog front end, maybe say, okay, that's fine, maybe say catalog web UI. So now let's create a new project code. So using npx, you can create a new project. So of course, you can give it your project a name. Maybe say, I'm just gonna do quick tab, maybe use cd dot. Okay, and then now I'll launch the command to create the catalog web UI. Or maybe not even say do this. Okay, so now my idea project, what I will be doing. So we can do npm or npx create a catalog web UI. So create catalog web, even if we call it web UI or catalog front end, it's still fine, but we can call it catalog web UI. So we'll create it. We probably need to give it some time. It takes a bit of a while to initiate this. Okay, so it's fine. Let's proceed with yes. Okay, we need to give it some time while it's creating those. So normally it takes a bit of some time, but we need to give it some time. So once you do all of this, you will import your project. So as I said, I already have done this process, but I'm just showing you on how you will create a new project using React. So now it will install all your dependencies and so on and so on, but it's fine. Let's give it some time while it's generating all of these files and installing all these dependencies, because there is another dependency that we require, which is the Axios dependency, or the Axios, which allows us to be able to send the HTTP request. Okay, so once you've done installing this bit, it will then require, we then need to install the Axios dependency as well. Okay, so let's give it some time. Again, this requires Node.js, so if you don't have Node, it's important that you install Node.js so you can be able to kickstart your project, your React project. Okay, so it does take a bit of some time, but you probably give it some time till it finalizes, and the wait it's important some time. Okay, so while it's doing that, perhaps while it's doing this, you can configure the cause at the backend, because normally if there's something called the cause, which is on my so for example, if we look at the back at our application or at our slides, so there is something called cause which we need to configure. So what are cause? So it means that, for example, for the front end to be able to consume the APIs at the backend needs to know the front end, where the project will, or which host will be accessing, which host and bot will be accessing the project, the backend project. So it's important that on the backend we allow those cause, or we add that configuration, so the front end won't be blocked when it's initiating the request to the backend. So that's what cause are helping us for. So in this case, if now when we have finished the front end, if we to try to to run the same thing, but of course it will take us some time and it won't be able to initiate any of our request since we haven't added the cause. But let's just give this one a minute, it will probably finish. So now it should be finishing now. Okay, well, it's still running. Okay, perhaps while it's still running, so okay, it's finalizing. Okay, so it should be finishing soon. Okay, perhaps you can prepare the code for now for the front end layer. So again, as I said, I've already done the process before, so I'm just gonna go to my VS Code. So once it is done creating those at your case, probably at your case, once you've done creating those, it will give you something, a structure like this. So at the source, you might find some dummy code, so you can just take off that one immediately, just delete it, so we can prepare the new code that will be adding. So of course, as I said, once this bit is done creating your project, I'm just going to cancel it for now. So once it is done creating it, you will then need to run this command, which is to install Axios. So immediately once that one is done finishing successfully, you will run the npm install Axios, or you will first cd to your project. So you will first do what? Cd to your project. So for example, if I do a cd to my catalog, front end, which is my project. But in case if you are calling it catalog web UI, you will probably do let's do cd back again. Cd back. So you probably do cd front catalog. You can see now it is successfully finished. So of course this is what you should be seeing now, but of course we'll be using that one. To catalog front end. So once you have all finished and you have a structure that is like this, because it should give you a structure that is like this once it has finished installing those node dependencies. And then from here you will install Axios, which is the HTTP library to initiate the HTTP request. So installing, you will need this command Axios. Okay, I do this. So install, yes. So we need this command, then you will set it to your project. Once you are in the home directory or root directory for a project, you will do npm install Axios react root DOM. So you probably don't really need the others, but this is the one that you need, Axios. Okay, because of that, it automatically comes by react root DOM when you've done the create command. So it will automatically install that too. But this one, which is the Axios, it won't be installed by default, which is why we require to install it manually. Okay, so once you have done the installation of Axios, you will then export your project or open your project from your IDE, and then we can start adding some basic snippets of code. Okay, so what we need now from here, so it will give you this basic stuff. So these you can delete it, they are not important. If you want, or if you don't, it's fine, you can leave them there. But of course, for production system, you wouldn't want to have those in. Okay, so again for source, this is now there. So again on source, it will probably give you some basic HTML files or CSS files. So you can also delete those since you want to have a proper structure. Okay, so from here, now we can begin to create our first folder, which is components. So we need to create components. So and then from here, now we create what? Another folder called services. Okay, so from here again, now we have two folders. So now we will need what? A file called index.js and a file called app.js, okay, and a file called for CSS. So let's just create those in there. So a file called index.css. So for now, let's just have these three files. Okay, so again we will start on. So now we have all of these files. We need to start on getting back our components now and service. So again, what is the service? This key. So a service, it's the file that will be responsible for delegating all our HTTP requests that we are making to the backend. So that's the service. And while the components are for interacting with the system, basically they were for interacting with the system, be able to interact with the user input, or be able to initiate the user input, and the rest of the request will be delegated by the services to the backend layer. Okay, so again from the service, what we require, Okay, so now as I said, I got some prepared snippets that I would like to use. So now we'll first get the book service.js. I'm just going to copy this in here. So if we go to our, so we give it book service.js. Okay, let's paste it now, and then we can look at the code for it. Okay, so here's our book service. So as I said, what does what delegates all our API requests to the backend. So hence we are having here, we are declaring here a const API base URL, which means this is now the backend URL that will be receiving all our requests. So when we create a class called the book service, and we have a first function which is get all books, and it returns what initializer.get. It gets based on that and goes to what, to the root that's responsible on the backend for returning all our books, and then it returns those. Same goes on the add book functionality. So we have another function which is add book, which returns what, initializer.post, because it's a post method. It goes to our base URL, and then it appends our suffix URL, and then it goes to that root book. It adds that root, that book that we've imported, which is what we are saying here. Same goes with the update. It gets what, an input of an ID and a book instance, and then it returns that book instance, which is it appends, or it puts this inputted data based on that, and updates that book based on the provided ID, and it updates that book instance. And again, using the delete function, it gets the input of an ID, and then it passes that ID from the delete endpoint on the backend, and then it deletes based. Okay, so that's what we require only for the book service. Okay, so now we can look at the components now. Okay, so here we'll require two components, which is the book form and the book list. Okay, so however, we got some snippets as well for that, so I'm just gonna copy from here. So book form JSX. Okay, so now we have the components. The first component that we require is a book form.jsx. Of course, this is a component, so hence it is JSX, not JS. It's a component, so normally components are returned with, especially if you are using React with JavaScript or not React with TypeScript, because if you were to use React with TypeScript, it will be TSX, not JSX. So in this case, it's going to be JSX. Okay, we paste our stuff. Of course, this is a bit long, so I'll go through it again so you can understand what's happening inside. And of course, if you require the source code, I can push it to my GitHub account, and becomes available to you all, just in case you require it. Okay, so now let's look at the first code. So we have now, which is the first time importing React, use effect, and the use state from React, of course. So let's look at the book service now. So, and also we're importing what, the book service, and we're specifying the path where the book service is on. You can simply click there as well, it should take you to the book service. So that means the import is fine. And then we're creating what, a book form that takes over the current book and the refresh list and the clear selection. And then we are initializing that with the book and the set book using a state. Of course, by default, we don't want to have anything like this for a name, ISBN, published date. But the default, it's normally for the book type, it's going to be hardcover. That's what this means. So we are initializing what, our book form with an empty name, empty ISBN number, empty published date, empty price, but with a default value in book type of a hardcover. So, and then we're doing here now, we're getting what the effect, we're using what the effect. So we are saying now, if the current book, and we are using the we are setting the book, and we set the book of the current book, and then we are returning that book. So okay, this just means that we are what, we are setting the current book to this object of this book, which is an empty object, but only with a default value of a hardcover. So that's what it means. So, and the rest of the other stuff, it's basically just returning the HTML for us to be able to do what, to view the form, and to be able to what, to add the values when we need to add a new book. So that's basically what this means, or what this is about. But as I said, if you require the code, I can just simply provide it to you. As you can see now from the handle submitter, so of course this is asynchronous event because of it goes to the backend and we wait to get the response back. So hence we are giving it as async. So again, with the way, as you can see now, it's normally an async. In JavaScript it goes with await. So we're doing book ID, await, and then we need to wait from the backend if the book has been created successfully, and then we can return the book back. So again, what we are having here now, so but of course we will be seeing this in a front end manner when we are running the project. Okay, so now once we have all of this for the book form, so now let's go to the book list. So if now I create a new JS file, which is book list .jsx, let's create this one too, and then copy the snippet. Okay, already this one tells itself if it's a book list, it means we are just the table that lists our book, or that returns our book list. That's what it means. So automatically we are expecting to see a lot of HTML and some CSS here in this one, because of it has some styles to list the book and to format the book catalog well. Okay, so again, first thing that we have, we are initiating our book list by getting the books and setting the books, and which is well normally, like it seems like it's pretty much getters and setters in normal high level language, but of course this just stands for it's book and set book. So you can use book or set book if you want to get books, or if you want to set the books. That's basically what it means, and it using state. Okay, so again, const fetch book. So now, as I said, this is a book list, so it's a must that it fetches immediately where this project runs and you are opening this page. It automatically needs to fetch the books from the backend and display them from your to the table side. So this is what we are doing here. So immediately it calls the book service and then gets all of our available books and then returns that, and meaning that right now it sets back our data. So it sets back our data. So in this case, set book is not empty, but now set book is empty, but as soon as it reaches here, it becomes not empty. Okay, and then we are just here displaying installing our table by providing some table header and table rows. This is what it means. This is just a plain basic HTML and some CSS. Okay, so again, now we are populating back our data based on the table header. For example, a book ID will be populated under ID, a book name will be populated under book under name, ISP number will be populated under ISP, published date will be populated under published date as the table header. Same goes for price and book type as well. Okay, and we have some two buttons, which is for on action. So the buttons are for edit and delete. So if we want to delete based on the book that we want, or update to it. So each book that has been displayed will have these two buttons next to it or on action. Okay, so now that we have that in here as well, that's fine. So now we can finalize our app. So now we need to call the entry point of our project. Okay, so if now we come to our app.js, I'll also explain this. So app.js, you go to it, go to this file. Okay, I'm just going to take this away. Okay, so app.js now. So again, this basically just calling our project basic, more like an entry point of our system. So automatically this is the page that you should be seeing on startup, and it will automatically goes to what it will call the book list and the book form, so you can be able to either list your books and perform some book operations based. Okay, so again it's returning what an app name and within some HTML stuff and some book form. Of course it does that. So as I said, if you require this code, I can just provide it to you as well via GitHub. I can just push it to my GitHub account, and then you can cloud on your end and just run it. That's not hassle. So now let's go to index.js. So index.js will normally be calling our style link. So of course, let's go to it. Okay. So I'll copy this as well and paste it in my index file. Okay, so now again this normally just calls the style for our document or for our book form. So again it will just be calling the style. So as I said, as you can see here, it normally just imports the style. So and then it renders it renders our application, which is what you see. It basically renders this file, which this file will give us a list of what? A list of our book list and a book form. And then it gets rendered here, more like a startup file and an entry point. That's what it means. We're having a startup file and an entry point. So a startup file is calling what? An entry point. An entry point will then be a reference to all of the other React pages or JavaScript pages. Okay. So now we need to get to what the style, the index.style, because of we need to style our form. So now we need to call back our CSS. Okay. So if we do that in here, I'm just gonna also take off this bit here. Okay, so as I said as well, if you require this code, because this is sometimes too much on HTML for you to go through each div, each markup, each body, headings, container tables and stuff, it becomes a bit too much. Because imagine if this was too much of a big project, then it would be too much to explain it within a timeless manner. Okay, so anyway, now that we have all of that in place, so we can begin to run this project. Okay, so again, the backend is still running, it's still actively listening, and we still have one book that we created initially on the backend side. So let's look at what will happen now if we run the two projects at the same time. Okay, so now that you have done everything on the front end as well, we need to start the front end project. So now if we go to our terminal and do what yarn or npm start. Okay, so now we need to give it some time also while it's starting up. So as I said, what I could expect in this case is for us to get some cause error, because immediately the backend will try to, immediately when the project starts, it will try to call the backend, and the backend will decline that because we haven't configured any front-end projects or any HTTP request coming to it. So, but of course we'll look at that as well. Let's just give it some time while this project starts. And wait a second. So now to start the front-end project, it's npm start. As I said, it will require Node.js, so ensure that when you are doing this process, you have Node.js installed in your machine. Okay, so let's give it some time while it's starting up. Okay, it should finish it now. Let's see if I can go to my browser now. I'll go to my browser. So normally this one will start at localhost port 3000. Okay. Of course, currently it isn't started yet, so it should fail. But of course, It should start in a minute, just as it's still loading the React script. Okay. Okay, it's starting up. Of course, we're still getting that. We just had fine. Yeah, my mistake. Sometimes React takes too long if you've installed all its dependencies. So normally you would rather want to specify only the ones you want. But of course, if you are creating your project from the terminal site and you clicked that install node modules, so it will automatically call and pull all of those nodes. So that's why sometimes the project will take some time to load, not because of it's a machine or just it's only because of React have installed all its component and modules, even the ones that you don't even need, which is what is happening in this case. But of course now it's starting up. Okay, it's just a matter of installing all of the unnecessary node modules. But anyway, now it's starting up. Now it should load, or it should automatically open it on the browser in a minute now. Then we can configure the backend, which is those calls on the backend. So immediately once the development server has started, it automatically opens up in the browser. So that one. As you can see now, it is starting up the development server. As you can see folks, it has started successfully. Now it's loading. The development server has finished starting up. So now it is loading our front-end project. So automatically now, by default, now it will try to initiate a connection to the backend, but due to those calls, it will fail. So, but we'll look at that and try and fix it. I just wanted you to see the issues that you might come across when you are integrating a front end to a backend project. Okay, let's just give it a time while it's finishing to start up. Okay, so okay, start starting. We can also try to reload this one. Okay, so normally when it's still sorting up the development server, it's compiling and building the project. So, but just that you wouldn't see that on the front end, like on the console, but it will automatically throw some logs to state that it has finished success compiling the project. Okay, so that's why now it's still taking some time to initiate that. It's just a matter of it's still attempting to reload and to compile the project. Okay, let's double check it. Okay, perhaps while it's still starting up. Okay. Okay, let's load it again. Yeah, this is takes some bit of some time, folks. So okay, let's look at that. Okay, let's look at that, folks. As you can see, now we are getting an error. So in our book.js, okay. Okay, so we have a problem with the naming. So that's why it is taking some time to reload. Okay, let's go fix that. Okay, in book cannot find book series, doesn't match. Okay, let's go there. Okay, this should be small. That's it. So here we have a book service in smaller letter, while this is a capital, so that's what it means. That's why we're having that error. Okay, so book form first. Let's look at book form. So book form, it's expecting book service, so let's first start at the book form. Yep. Okay, so let's just make book service and rename, make it as a book service. Okay, because that's the problem. Okay, book forms are fine, they are matching. Book list, let's look at this one, index, yes, that's matching as well. So that was that error that you got there. Book form, yes. Okay, now it should start fine, folks. Okay, let's attempt to start it up again. Okay, okay, yes, folks. Okay, now that we fixed that error that we are receiving above, so let's start it up again. Okay, so it's starting up again. Let's just give it some time while it will load our application. Okay, at least now we shouldn't be getting any error now, except the cause problem when we are sending a request. So probably that one will come as a network error from the front-end side, but of course we'll add that. So the backend is still running fine. Okay, the front end is started the development server now. Okay, now it is also opened up my browser automatically. So let's just give it a time and let it finish compiling. Then it will automatically start up fine. Okay, so now it's doing that. So it means from here, once it attempts to send a request to the backend, we'll have to configure those calls so we can be able to initiate a connection successfully and be able to consume the backend API. Okay, so now let's just, okay, so as I said initially, this stage, it means the front end is busy compiling and building the project. So once that finishes, it will again load successfully this site. So we just need to give it some build time. Okay, so perhaps in the meantime, okay, either way we'll have to kill this when we are updating the course. So we'll have to kill the backend, so we can just wait until the front end is finished, and then we can look at that error as it is imported. It's something that I wanted to show you guys so you can see some of the issues that you get when you are configuring or when you're integrating the backend to the front end. So normally that's one of the major issues, which is the cause. Okay, this side is compiling. Okay, let's just give it time while it finishes. Okay, seems like now it is finished compiling with some warnings. Okay, yes, exactly. This is the problem that I was referring to. So immediately on the front end, so it means now the back end, the front end tried to send a request to populate the results or the data from the back end to the front end, but the back end refused because of it's not configured to accept a request coming from this route or from localhost 3000. So let's look at that now and verify if it's really the cause error. So if you go to inspect, this is what you should be seeing. You go to network and then try to reload it again. As you can see, there it tells you cause missing, allow origin. So that's what we need to allow. As you can see, it went to that endpoint on localhost, which is at my backend. It went to that route, get all books, but it got rejected due to the missing cause error. So let's go at the backend now to configure that. That is what I want to show you, folks, just in case you come across that error. And this is just our UI with some CSS installed. So what I will do now, I will again, okay, it's fine, we can keep the front end running because of we just need to let the backend to know that we have cause to configure. So I'm just gonna copy this snippet as well to the backend and go to my config package, create a basic class, configure cause, config cause, create that in. Okay, this is our config class being created. Okay, I'm just gonna paste this here. Maybe just use. Okay. Okay, let's just rename this to match our variable, cause config. Okay, let's execute to yes, our name. Okay, maybe what you can just do, I will do this here. Oh, it's a class. Okay, so let's just do this one and then have one thing simple. Okay, and now if we come back again and copy our snippet and just fix those minor issues. Okay, let's delete that, and now delete this one. Let's delete this nested class. Okay, and fix the package name. Okay, so now this is what should be seen. Okay, so now folks, I'll have to stop the backend since we have updated it and let it reload again. So this is what it means now to configure course. It basically means we need to create what a basic bean that will just automatically bootstrap our course and let our project to be able to accept any request coming from that, which is it needs to accept any endpoint or any request coming from this path, which is the root path, and the allowed origin. It means anything from this that is running or from this route, it will be able to accept it and process the request from that. And any methods in this list, it should accept those as well, which is the get, post, put, delete, and options. Again, as we know that this is our front-end project that is running from this route, so or from this endpoint. So with this one, it means we are accepting any request coming from it. Again, the allowed headers, it means anything with the sense we are using a star. Okay, so now that is done, so we can reload our backend project. It should now automatically connect to the front end. So I guess while we've done that, we can also reload the front end. We'll just also start up the front end, and then we can, while it's still starting up, because I know sometimes it takes some time, to load. So I will let it start as well. So while it is starting up, I know the backend is quick in starting up. So once the backend is done, and then we'll start populating some data for the front end, so at least it can also load some data for us. Okay, so we know now that the backend is starting up. Okay, and we've configured the code, so we shouldn't be, as you can see, okay, put 8080, so it means now the backend is successfully started out successfully. So now we can look at the front end now. So if we go to our Swagger schema now, we should be able to populate some new data. As you know, as I said, this is using a H2 in-memory DB. So immediately when we have reloaded it, it will lose all your data. So hence you might have to re-add some new data. And of course, now that we have configured the flow between front end and the back end, so it means the two projects will be able to connect and communicate together. So we can, instead of us using this Swagger schema to add some data from the DB or to write or to perform any DB operations, we can simply use our front-end application. So now let's just give it some time while it's starting up. I assume it is still starting up now. So you might just have to wait a bit. But in the meantime, maybe we can again add one book so that immediately when it is starting up, it will automatically populate the new data that will have been added right now. Okay, so again, maybe if we can just send a request again, we can send this request again. So now, of course, now it will be book number 1 because of we no longer have any data now because of the project is restarted. So now let's send this request. Let's create one book. As you can see, one book has been created successfully. Let's create another one. Maybe say this time Java clean code and say SpringBoot microservice. SpringBoot microservice. Give it some ISBN. Just put some random number. Okay, it's fine in ebook. Let's add this one too. Okay, so you can see now book number 2 has been added. Okay, the front end is still loading. Okay, so it means now both our books have been added successfully. Okay, and also we can verify that even if we go to our Swagger schema by okay, we can reload this. Even if we go to our Swagger schema now to get all our books, we should get 2 books, or we should be returning 2 books. So let's execute it. And yes, we are getting back our 2 books. Let's verify the front end. Okay, it's still building and compiling, so that's fine. So now that we have that in, we are both getting back our 2 books. So now let's just wait until the front end finalizes that, and then we can be able to use this front end to add or delete or update our books. Okay, let's just double check it. Okay, seems like it's starting out now. Okay, so now while it's doing that, what else we can look at currently? Okay, let's just wait until it finishes. Because now we have added everything and our backend is expecting all the requests now from this endpoint or from this route to be processed successfully. So now it means all our requests will be processed now. Okay, so again, let's verify that. Okay, maybe just to do a pause while it's still loading. Okay, looks like it's starting the development server. Okay, as you can see now, it automatically started our as you can see, folks, now it means everything is started successfully and our data is being returned to us, which is the same data I just added. So as you can see now, the backend, now this is what I was expecting. So these are the log that you will be getting immediately when your project is started successfully and it is able to connect to your backend. So now it means now already at our Swagger schema we added 2 books and we can see those 2 books already on our front end. So it means our project is successfully able to communicate with our backend server and is able to read the data and it displays to our front end. So we can add one last book again, maybe say now master lab systems, add an ISB or any digit, maybe add a basic date, and also we can get our date here, add a date, add a price, let's say 500 price, and hardcover, let's make it this time maybe a soft cover, and let's add it. Okay, let's look at that. Request fields, that is 400. Okay, let's see if we can figure that out. Okay, assuming this one it's coming from where? Okay, but this is where you so assuming this one probably have a naming variable that we are missing there. Probably have a naming that we are missing. Okay, so if we go back to okay, let's see if we can update one book. Okay, it comes in. Let's change the book type from ebook to hardcover. Okay, so it is updated successfully. Okay, so probably something we missed or something is breaking up at our end on the front end at the book. So it probably coming from the button at the book at our front end, book list, book service. Yeah, probably it's definitely coming from our book list. Okay, but anyway, we can look at that as well in another time. But the purpose of this demo was to show you how you can build your own full stack or front end, your own full stack project that has a backend and a front end running. So again, let's test to delete. So it means now the only operation that is breaking up on the front end, it's the add function. But of course, if you look at delete and update, they are fully working, and even the list is returning everything fine. So let's attempt to delete this one now. Okay, as you can see, even delete operation is working successfully. So it means I might have to look at the problem for it. But anyway, folks, I think I should end here for today. Thank you so much for listening. I know it's quite a long demo. Thank you so much for listening. And if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and like. Thank you so much, folks. I will be seeing you next time. So again, next time probably might be looking at it, dockerizing this, do this, or maybe fixing that smaller bug and dockerizing our project. So again, finalizing our slide. So I'm just going to go to our last bit. So as I said, the next step will the next demo will be fixing that smaller bug and looking at deploying this project to Docker and testing from the Docker side. Again, I'll wrap up in the next steps. As I said, we looked at creating a full stack project, and then also another idea for extending this app is to add some authentication to your APIs before using them, and also instead of using the in-memory DB that loses your data each time your application reload, you might also look at scaling and using some persistent DB storage such as MySQL. And also, as I said, please folks, if you like this video, please subscribe and follow to my channel, and I will see you next time. Cheers. Peace out, folks.